Good morning and welcome to this webinar co-organized between UNEP, Copenhagen Climate Center and the World Food Programme on clean cooking and climate adaptation in schools, research, policy and partnerships for sustainable transitions in East Africa. My name is James Haselip and I work as an energy and climate advisor at UNEP Copenhagen Climate Center and I'm co-moderating this session alongside Suzana at WFP, who is based at Nairobi, and hopefully you can see her on the screen. And we've assembled an expert panel to discuss this topic, and you can see them here in the flyer, and we'll introduce them as we go along. And if you have any questions on any of the presentations, you're welcome to submit these in writing, and we will choose from these during the Q&A session, for which we hopefully will have 20 minutes at the end. And we aim to complete the webinar within the hour. So just to explain that at UNEP CCC, we use webinars as a kind of knowledge product. So while it's live, it will be uploaded onto our YouTube channel. So you can go back, pause, take notes, etc. And I mention this because there will be a lot of information in the presentation. So don't worry if you miss something. And so before handing over to Susie, I will just go quickly through 3 slides to frame this topic in climate terms, and maybe starting from the high-level event that was organized last May by the IEA to really put clean cooking on the top-level political agenda, a heads of state level event in Paris. And this is we've selected here from the outcome text that clean cooking is a solvable development challenge that will have positive impacts on the lives of millions of people in the poorest countries, and the focus here was really on Africa. And climate angle was also emphasized in this event. And in the next slide, we take here some facts and figures from a report that we published with WFP, the Global Platform for Action, and our partners at Last Mile Climate. It was myself and Yvonne Bisaga authoring this report. And the baseline situation is really that biomass fuel is a driver of land degradation, deforestation, and that the combustion of biomass fuels contributes, for cooking, I should say, up to 2% of global CO2 emissions, including black carbon, which can make up to 60 to 80% of national black carbon emissions in Africa and Asia. So this, in climate terms, this is almost a gigaton of CO2 equivalent, or similar to what is emitted by the aviation sector, but it's a much lower abatement cost. So it's a really obvious climate action agenda. And in the next slide, we have some figures. Oh yeah, no, this is basically just to see, as I say, clean cooking as a climate action agenda. So not just the mitigation potential and the avoided emissions, but also how to reduce reliance on biomass, ever scarce biomass, and how this can help build resilience and be framed as an adaptation side issue. So what can we do to speed up this transition to clean cooking, to modern energy cooking services? Well, by framing it as a climate issue, of course, it can be included in the revised NDCs, the nationally determined contributions that are being revised this year in most countries, or even the national adaptation plans. And this is a means to facilitate access to grant or concessional climate funding and finance, and also carbon financing. And that's something that my colleague Gabriel from UNEP will talk about later on. And I think I have maybe one more slide. No, I don't. That's my last slide. And now I'll hand over to Susie, and you can take it from here and then lead us into the presentations. Thank you, Susie.
Thank you, James, and good morning, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us on this webinar. So James just sketched out, the importance of clean cooking in the climate action agenda, and just what that is globally as well. So what does that have to do with school feeding? So in East Africa and globally, momentum on scaling up school meals to national coverage is gaining traction. For example, since 2021, the government of Rwanda has been implementing a subsidized national school feeding program, which is now reaching 4.2 million students every day. Kenya's government launched a national school meals coalition late last year with the common goal of achieving universal coverage by 2030, which will be around 10 million children. So this is great news because governments are prioritizing school feeding, and more specifically homegrown school feeding, whereby the food for school meals is being purchased as locally as possible, thereby supporting local food systems because these investments have significant social and economic returns. Evidence indicates impressive multi-sectoral benefits for school meals. For every $1 spent on school meals, there is an estimated return of $9. This is achieved by improving outcomes related to education, health and nutrition, social protection, and local agriculture. However, as school meals coverage increases to millions of meals being cooked daily, we must consider how these meals are being cooked. Given the current state of energy access in the region and in the absence of alternative cooking fuels, particularly in remote rural areas that the World Food Programme works in, most schools still rely on firewood for their cooking needs. Firewood is increasingly difficult and expensive to procure, burdensome to store and prepare, and negatively impacts the health of cooks through the smoke it produces. Heavy reliance on firewood in school feeding is also a contributing factor to deforestation and wider environmental degradation and to the emissions of greenhouse gases, as James also highlighted in his presentation. For these reasons, it is vitally important to help schools use firewood as efficiently as possible, as well as to foster the development of clean and affordable alternative cooking fuels. With this webinar, together with UNEP, we want to raise awareness on this pressing issue, offer insights, pose questions for discussion, and foster connections and partnerships to design appropriate business models and financing solutions. I'm now going to introduce our first presenter, Silvia Pastorino, Planet Friendly School Meals Initiative lead from the School Meals Coalition Research Consortium and based at the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine. Silvia will give us an overview of the environmental impact of school meals and the research agenda that exists to address these challenges. Silvia, please go ahead, turn on your camera and start presenting your slides. Thanks.
Thank you, Suzana, for the introduction. So today, as Suzana mentioned, I'm going to talk about the environmental school meals, of clean cooking in school meals, and the role, health impact, and the research need and gaps, and also the status of school, clean cooking in schools. First, I want to start with setting the scene and giving a little bit of an introduction overview about what the Research Consortium for School Health and Nutrition is. This is the evidence-generating body of the School Meal Coalition, which is a coalition of now more than 105 countries. The coalition was created in the wake of COVID-19 to scale up and improve the school meal programs worldwide. The Research Consortium works as a consortium of community of practice, which have the mandate to develop, co-create, shares, and different evidence, but also best practice around different aspects of school meals. As part of one of these community of practice, food system community of practice, and I led the development of a white paper on school meal and food system. The paper, which was co-creating in collaboration with more than 87 organizations worldwide, was really about how implementing, creating planet-friendly school meal practices in school can have massive environmental and health co-benefit, and how school meal could really serve as an entry point for food system transformations. The paper was launched at COP28 in Dubai in 2023. And it really came about as a realization that food system, climate change, and environmental degradation, as well as food security, are highly interconnected. For example, While on one side, unsustainable food system has caused more than 30% of the world population to be in food insecure, they also cause significant damage to the environment and climate. At the same time, climate change disrupts food production and quality and hence increase food insecurity. School meal offered a unique opportunity. First, they feed they can feed a very large amount of people, especially of children worldwide. In 2022, the amount of children were fed by school meal was more than 480 million, and this number is growing. One benefit of school meal that they are managed and they are financed domestically, which means that government can really make changes at scale. As part of the planet-friendly school meal conceptual framework that we created within the planet-friendly school meal initiative in the research consortium, we identified two key sets of mitigation and adaptation policy strategy within school meal programs. And clean cooking fits within the mitigation strategy, and they have significant potential to offer both environmental and health benefits. In fact, we know that more than 2.3 billion people lack access to clean, safe, and reliable cooking for cooking energy. As already been said, this causes deforestation and greenhouse gas emissions on a massive scale. But also, if clean cooking was implemented, was achieved universally in all emerging markets, more than 3 million preventable deaths could be, especially due to respiratory cardiovascular disease, could be prevented worldwide. And these deaths would be mostly among women and children, which are the greatestly affected and most at risk. The importance of the contribution of clean cooking to mitigate the potential mitigation of this aspect to Africa cannot be overestimated more. In fact, agri-food systems are the main cause of emission in Africa, and this emission are mainly driven by land use change, which means mostly deforestation. The need basically the use of wood fuel, both for different type of fuel, but also for cooking in East African countries, actually accounts for more than 50% of those countries' total emission. So the mitigation potential of clean cooking is massive. I'm now going to focus a little bit more on specifically on school. We know that in 2022, more than 85% of schools in low-income countries, and this number is higher for African and East Africa especially, were still using unsustainable cooking methods, including open fire, charcoal, and mostly using an inefficient wood stove, mostly using unsustainable wood fuel. There was minimal, if non-existent, access to electric stove. This, especially in sub-Saharan Africa, accounted for more than 8 million tons of firewood used per year just in sub-Saharan African schools. And also there was proof that not only was the health consequences of indoor air pollution were not only among staff, but were also among children. There are three key approaches when we talk about clean cooking in schools in terms of research and implementations. This includes more efficient cooking, for example, by changing menus or by changing behavior like using lids. And then obviously different energy use, going from the basic level of biomass and transition all the way up to electricity. The cooking equipment that at different costs and also obviously has different efficiencies. Multiple clean cooking solutions already exist. Some of their impact on various metrics has already been assessed. As you can see from the left, there are different the cleanest clean cooking solution with the highest benefit for both the environment, for climate and health are electricity, LPG, gas, but also eco pellet. It needs to be emphasized as the highest benefit from electricity and pellet for gas fire obviously would come when these come from sustainable and renewable sources. But it's not that simple because, for example, if you look on the right, there's some of the cleanest solutions, some of the solutions with the highest benefit of multiple metrics, including social, gender, and health, unfortunately have sometimes higher upfront cost. And also so can be more difficult to scale up in settings that are very diverse. In fact, the latest ISMA report showed that in a survey of clean cooking initiative, most of which were implemented by international organizations so far, but this is changing because of the country government commitment to really drive these programs. But in 2003, this survey showed that most initiatives were still using improved cook stores, fueled by firewood of charcoal, with stacking is the most very prevalent. As I say, access to electricity was minimal, but at least we know the benefit, and these two, gas and electricity, are very well researched. On the other hand, alternative clean cooking fuels are still in the innovation and development phase. One problem came from these surveys that it was very difficult to estimate. A lot of schools did not estimate the cooking energy consumption and expenditure. There were also problems when it comes to field performance data and fuels. Lots of lacking of data. Indeed, there was a major data gaps, and these major data gaps can hinder the scale-up of clean cooking strategies in schools. One of the key data gaps is there are not enough good up-to-date statistics on the rate of clean cooking access in school, as well as what are the actual barriers in different contexts. Another key data gap is that there is a need to really an accurate need for accurate costing of fuel that use in different cooking technologies. This would really help government and different stakeholders estimate the real return on investment, especially if there is upfront cost is a bit higher. They would need to understand in the long term this would significantly reduce the use of fuel, as shown on the little pictures on the right. This reliable data, obviously, in turn could incentivize the promotion and uptake of clean cooking solution by the people that use it on the ground, because a lot of people might not realize, especially at the school level, they might not realize the consequence and the fact that it might actually be massive savings in the long term. And I'm just going to give an overview of very few case studies to show what is possible and some of the best performing solution at institutional level that already exist. This is a study that was driven by World Food Program, MEX as part of Labbate University. MEX is Modern Energy Cooking Solution, and the government of Rwanda. It was a study on 14 schools in Rwanda were initially using firewood, and they switched all the school to electric pressure cooking. They have school cooking diary, and they did controlling cooking tests. They used this data to create a school cooking model to understand better the fuel cost, but also the impact on emission, time saving, and the use on sustainable wood. This model is now being further develop, and we have a plan to, in collaboration with MEX, to create a toolkit that could be used, that could be applied with different contexts. This and other studies on the use of electropressure cooking resulting in implemented at World Food Programs, and also for MEX in other different countries, not only in Lesotho, but other countries in context in East Africa. For example, they have one in Tanzania, and they have one in Kenya. electric pressure cooker offer a significant advantage compared to others in terms of fuel efficiency, times, and cost savings in the long terms. And they'll be shown to be very, very well suited to institutional cooking because they can cook very large amount of food in small time. They can offer the potential to cook very highly nutritious food like beans that would take a longer time, but obviously with this type of technology, the time would be significantly cut. My last example comes from Food for Education in Kenya. Food for Education is a Kenyan organization that started about 10 years ago and now has feeding many children in Nairobi and outskirts and beyond. I wanted to highlight kind of the cooking technology they have implemented, which is steam cooking in one of their kitchens. Actually, they have more than one kitchen, but one of the kitchen is called the Giga Kitchen. It's the largest in Africa and feeds more than 60,000 children a day. Steam cooking is basically boiler generated by heat, which creates steam to power cooking at the large scales. They use eco briquettes, which Food for Education has estimated could save up to more than 30,000 trees every day. They also have water saving technology because the steam can cool down and be reused, with significant improvement in health and environment. Obviously, this is great, but it might be this very large kitchen might be more difficult to implement in rural setting. Nevertheless, it's often an interesting alternative. So this is the end of my presentation, but I want to highlight that we have a whole program of planet-friendly school meal, and if you are interested, please contact us or contact me directly. We're now working in partnership with different countries to implement some of the policy from the white paper, and as I mentioned, we have a toolkit we are developing to predict the outcomes of different policy in terms of environment and health. And we're also producing a special issue in Lancet Planetary Health, and we have continuous engagement with policy making and key decisions makers. So thank you for listening to me, and please get in touch if you have any question you want to know more.
Thank you very much, Silvia, for that very informative presentation. I'm now going to hand over to Mary Njenga, who's a bioenergy research scientist at the World Agroforestry, or C4 ICRAF, who has extensive research on bioenergy for ecosystems restoration and clean cooking, including in refugee settings. And she's going to present on how all this research may be applied to the rural contexts of homegrown school feeding. Thank you, Mary, over to you.
Thank you so much. I'd like to talk about research on bioenergy for ecosystems restoration and clean cooking. I work with the Center for International Forestry Research and World Agroforestry, which are two centers merged. And our research is mostly on trees for the people and the planet. And we are addressing 5 key challenges: deforestation and biodiversity loss, a climate crisis, transforming food systems and sustainable supply value chain, extreme inequality. And for this presentation, mostly I focus on resilient socio-ecological bioenergy systems and clean cooking in schools. When you look at this slide, you see that there are 2 components of the socio-ecological bioenergy system. From the ecological perspective, we look at, for example, the agroforestry system integrating crops and livestock. From that kind of system, then we are able to get different types of bioenergy: firewood, charcoal, briquettes, biogas, bioethanol, bioelectricity, And then we get the biochar, which goes back into the agroforestry system. From this system, we also find that when the trees are growing, they are also capturing carbon, providing carbon sinks, as well as providing the bioenergy. And from the social component is that we look at the kitchen from a system perspective. The fuel that is being used, the quality of the fuel, the cooking appliances, so that we can improve the kitchen from a system perspective. And the next thing I would like to say is that when we look at the bioenergy, tree-based energy, we look at it from a system perspective that considers the whole supply and use chain, sustainable production of the biomass, the conversion of biomass into bioenergy, and where the biomass is being grown, is it close to where it's being utilized? And finally, looking at the utilization part. And what we work on is enhancing sustainability in every stage and reducing inefficiencies. And the other thing that we incorporate is the circular bioeconomy, reducing wastage, reducing emissions, and capturing the residues for energy. And when we look at this system, then it has multiple benefits addressing several sustainable development goals. To start with, what we are really working on is to see that there is sustainable production of biomass. And when we are working with small-scale farmers, we look at the different agroforestry systems, whether you are growing the trees on the boundary, in a wood lot, a small forest within the farm, or you are intercropping. Based on the different systems that a farmer has adopted, then the amount of biomass that is produced varies. The length of period that the biomass, let's say firewood, lasts the community depends on their end use also. Using more efficient biomass cook stoves extends the time that the firewood lasts. And when we look at this sustainable biomass production, is that we are also considering these as both adaptation and mitigation. From the perspective of adaptation, for example, when we are working on the biomass sustainable production in the dry rights, we find that when you grow trees, you intercrop them with crops or livestock, is that communities are adapting to climate change. For example, drought. If they are able to grow trees, then this contributes to restoration of the landscape, where they get other benefits. And then they also need to use efficient stoves, because then they need to reduce the wood wastage and they need to reduce smoke in the kitchen. One example I'd like to give of our tree growing program that links directly to school feeding is one in Mfepi camp in Uganda. And in this camp, two of them, Rhino and Mfepi, is that World Agroforestry Center has established an agroforestry training center. Here, the communities are trained and supplied with quality seedlings. We have community facilitators who we train, who work with the communities. And then the communities are growing these wood for other benefits, as well as getting prunings for firewood. And we are finding that households are getting 30% of the firewood. When we are working with the annex primary school, is that they are growing trees and they are getting the prunings for cooking. And they are also using improved cookstoves for the multiple benefits that we have mentioned. The other thing I would like to talk about is that when we think about clean cooking in schools, we need to look at it from a large-scale perspective. If we are to work with farmers, for example, if a landscape has 6,000 farmers and their capacity is built to produce firewood sustainably, they are also using the firewood at home. And as mentioned by the previous speaker, we have seen that when households are introduced to other cooking fuels, they add them into the traditional one. So they are stacking, and therefore the firewood seems to be there for some time. And that's why we need to also improve on it. If we are working with the 6,000 households I mentioned, and we want to produce firewood sustainably for a certain school, then the communities can be able to grow the trees, short rotation or from prunings, and they are selling as a source of income. And then their children don't have to carry firewood to schools because their parents are growing firewood and selling as a source of income. And growing trees will have the multiple benefits, which act as carbon sinks, and will also restore landscapes that have been degraded by climate change. The other example I would like to talk about is how to utilize the invasive Prosopis juniflora for bioenergy. One of the projects that we've been working with is the Kakuma Karobeye refugee settlement, which is now a municipality, and the communities are managing the invasive species and turning it into wood rods. And they pick the mature stems, and the mature stems are dried very well, and then the firewood is applied, which is given to refugees, or the communities are selling in small bundles to the refugees. Once they have the vouchers, then they can buy. And the other option is that it's sustainable charcoal production using a stem of 5 centimeters in diameter, and then improving the kilns, like the earth kiln, where we are training communities on drying the wood very well, and then stacking it, fixing air breathers, and we are measuring the emissions from the conventional system of producing charcoal and the improved. And we are finding a significant reduction in the carbon dioxide equivalent, so reducing the emissions. And then the other thing we are working on is another type of fuel, tree-based, where in Kakuma there is the briquette production plant, and to produce briquettes from the prunings of Prosopis, the communities sell, and these prunings are converted into char, and then it's bound with a starch and turned into briquettes. And this briquette can be used for institutional cooking, can be used for households. And the other stage I would like to say, and is very critical, is that the system, the firewood, the charcoal, or the briquettes need to be used in very efficient cook stoves. If you look at the photo up here to the right, these are improved cook stoves which are installed in a hospital institutions, and they exhaust smoke such that the cooking with firewood or briquettes can be made cleaner. And the briquettes that are being produced, they will be certified, the quality checked, because then they may have to meet the Kenya Bureau of Standards. And this is a project that is between FAO, UNHCR, WFP, ICRAF, and other local partners. And finally, is that our research, all the science we produce, is contributing to building climate resilience and energy policy, and programming, because we need the data to be able to influence how programs are made. For example, in making cooking cleaner in schools. And one thing we start with is to package the information in ways that it is utilizable by policymakers, by development practitioners. And a few examples I want to give is that like we contributed significantly to the development of the Intergovernmental Authority on Development, IGAD, climate adaptation strategy by providing data, by providing best case studies. The same thing we did with the climate action plan for the East and Horn of Africa and Great Lakes region, led by UNHCR. Once we produce this data, we package it in fact sheets or policy briefs. But the next thing is that there is need for planning tools, decision-making tools, decision support tools. One of the examples I would like to give is the example of Energy Access Explorer. This is an explorer being worked by World Resources Institute and partners that is able to look at what is the supply, what is the demand, and then this advises policy development. In the case of clean cooking in schools, this kind of tool can be applied, for example, in a certain county, in a certain landscape, to show what is the supply of biomass and what is the demand based on what systems are being used. And I'd like to say thank you very much.
Thank you, Mary, for your presentations. Lots of fantastic detail there. Connecting cooking fuel to the wider ecosystem sustainability, and obviously acknowledging that the biomass fuels remain the primary and dominant source of cooking fuel in East Africa and Africa as a whole, I suppose. One thing I just forgot to mention earlier in my introduction is that we, UNEP, are working with UNDP and FAO on a technical and policy analysis report on clean cooking to inform the NDC revision process, which is taking place this year in most countries. And so we will include adaptation and economic, the co-benefits, that some of which Mary mentioned. So I just wanted to flag that. And again, sort of framing clean cooking as a climate action agenda. So on that note, let me pass over to my colleague, Gabriel Labbate, who's joining us from UNEP in Nairobi, and Gabriel heads the unit on climate mitigation, but within the adaptation side of the climate division. So you'll be talking about, I think, mostly carbon financing. So Gabriel, over to you, and we will be controlling your slides from here. So just indicate when you want us to move on. Thank you.
Thanks, James. And I believe that we are running a bit late. So I'll try to provide this in a shorter time. Can we go to the first slide, please? Let me start then with a summary of what my colleagues presented before. But the number at the top is the one that actually a few years ago impressed me the most, which is 2.3 billion people. That's a lot of people. That is about one in 3.5 lack access to clean cooking. Second thing is that the fuel they use, as my colleagues were saying, carries with it significant health problems, particularly for women. So there are a number of initiatives to improve this, have cleaner cooking devices. And one of the questions is that, okay, that's perfect. This is what I want. How can we pay for it? Particularly in times in which international assistance, development aid is diminishing, is ebbing. Next slide, please. So something that we are looking at here in UNEP is the carbon market. And the carbon market has a number of advantages. And one of them is to, perhaps after mitigation, one of the most important ones is to actually diminish the cost of mitigation targets. And some of these estimates put this decrease in costs. If we can have markets of high integrity, that's an assumption, so for the time being, take it as a given, go with it, could save anything between 40 and 60% of cost, mitigation costs. And the other thing is that the mitigation gap we have is major. In order to have a chance of staying within 2 degrees and avoiding the worst of the impacts of climate change, well, we're still about 12 gigatons in the red. And 12 gigatons is the entire emissions from China, or twice the emissions of the United States. Next slide, please. So if we turn to carbon markets, then yes, we have had problems with cookstove projects. And for those of you that would like to learn more about it, well, you will see that there is something called the fraction of non-renewable biomass, which is, if you have a community using biomass for cooking devices, is that a sustainable take from the forest ecosystem, or you are taking more than what the forest can reproduce naturally. Well, that's not an easy question to answer, and has been plaguing with problems, the cookstoves category, for some time. The other one is the emission factor, which is if you burn, if we take this wood and we burn it, how much emissions we have. The fuel consumption, how much really the existing cookstoves require. We cannot put somebody 24/7 in a household, so this is an approximation. This is a proxy estimate of how much wood a typical family will consume. And other things like you said, adoption stacking, but I will not go there now for the purpose of time. Now, when you go to the voluntary carbon market, which is the only carbon market at the moment, trading credits on cookstoves, it's not a minor amount. Even with all these problems, cookstoves take 7.5% of the entire volume of market, or 127 million tons. 127 million tons, that is about, between 1/5 and 1/6 of the emissions, of the total emissions of Germany. So it's also substantial. Next slide. So for those of you that are interested in exploring whether carbon markets can help your project, I would say keep an eye open for tomorrow, March 7th. There is an initiative, a multi-stakeholder initiative to ensure integrity in the market. It's called the Integrity Council for the Voluntary Carbon Market. Is that acronym there, ICBCM, that has undergone an assessment of several cookstove methodologies, and tomorrow it will make public the announcement, and we expect some of these categories to receive a very coveted signal of quality, which is called the core carbon principles, that CCP label. So I believe that some of these categories will receive this, and if they get this, it will be a seal of integrity. Where we expect that this will act as a signal to the market that if you want to improve in this category, and I hope you will, because it's an excellent, if done well, it's an excellent credit category, because of the mitigation actions and of all the other things that the previous presenters put on the screen. Well, this is the type of credit you want to buy. And for project developers, if you plan to tap the market, this is the type of methodology you want to apply. And UNEP is very interested in this because of the non-carbon benefits in addition to mitigation. So we will always be at your disposal as much as our resources allow, in case there are doubts or questions. And with that, thank you very much, James, for the opportunity to speak in this webinar. And I hope this will increase interest in this category.
Thank you, Gabriel. Very good. And it's a pleasure to be collaborating with you. And we have a lot of joint work with under the Article 6 projects that we run also here from Copenhagen. So that's really good collaboration. So we have got some good questions from the audience. Susie and I will basically share this moderation role for the last discussion session. I will kick off with one question that we got. I think it's for Silvia's presentation. What behavior change is needed in school kitchens when using different cooking technologies? What have we learned so far? For example, electric pressure cookers require different types of cooking behavior than compared to wood fuel. I guess that's mostly relevant for Silvia, but others, of course, can jump in and complement. So, Silvia, if we can ask you to rejoin us with the camera and microphone and perhaps provide a quick comment to that question. Thank you.
Yes, thank you for the question. It's actually a very good question. From partners working on the field, on electropressure cooking studies and research on the field, it's actually crucial that there is some kind of training and able to understand why, how and what type of food is used, and how cooking actually work in the kitchen in different settings. For example, I would say like a lot, because they come from maybe like setting where they have open fire, for example, they might not be using lids, which is one of the key behavioral changes to save energies, might not be always used. I also know from talking with researchers sometimes there might be like technological problems. For example, if the lid, some of the very more advanced technology might have setting on the lid. So for example, the lids are taken off on more often falls and get broken. So there is also an element of how do you manage very advanced technology, what happens if something breaks. Continuous management of the technologies is probably key, and that can only be done by interacting with the communities and really understanding how this technology is used, rather than just giving the technology and with a little bit of training and hoping that everything will be fine. And often it takes time and a lot of problem solving that happens when you cook in large amount of food with a lot of people dealing with different technology. Might not be always the same people also that have the training. They might actually be the people that do the cooking, might be other people from the one that actually had the initial training. So yeah, behavior change is kind of very important.
Thanks, Silvia. Great. We have other questions as well. I don't know, because Susie and I can see the questions, and I don't know, Susie, if you want to jump in and ask one of the others. We have the choice is yours.
Thanks, James. Yeah, there was one more question posed, which I'm just going to attempt to answer. But the question is really around basically the responsibility for clean cooking and in schools. We saw through the presentations that, we're not only talking about clean cooking, but also schools. So the Ministry of Education would get involved. What about the Ministry of Energy? If we're talking about biomass, for example, and forestry and land use, usually ministries of natural resources get involved too. So I think the question is, how are we ensuring that clean cooking in schools doesn't fall in between all these ministries in terms of responsibility and who's really going to pick up on this agenda. And what I can say is that the governments have recognized this, and definitely the School Meals Coalition has also raised this as an issue. So the example I used in my introduction, for example, in the government of Kenya, they've really set up a special coordination mechanism for this so that it doesn't drop in between all these different ministries. So definitely coordination is something that's really required for this agenda, and governments are picking it up with support from different stakeholders as well. And then we have one more question for Gabriel. If you could come back online or on camera, Gabriel. But you mentioned at the end of your presentation the non-carbon benefits of clean cooking. I know that your presentation was on the carbon market, but about these non-carbon benefits, could you speak to those a bit and how they could be monetized as well?
Thanks, Susie. Well, my colleagues that spoke before me made strong case for forest conservation, forest ecosystem conservation, and health benefits. So those are really two very, very important non-carbon benefits. But in addition to that, I didn't mention that because of the short time, but a very important one is that when let's suppose you apply a program on clean cooking that brings back that fraction of non-renewable biomass to zero, meaning that the forest is able to produce enough wood on a sustainable manner, then you increase forest conservation. Well, if done at scale, that comes with adaptation benefits. It's a proven fact that communities that are living in stable ecosystems, because these are stable ecosystems, they have a greater capacity to withstand extreme weather events or other impact from climate change. So health benefits, biodiversity benefits from forest conservation, adaptation benefit, gender related benefits is a very good package.
Gabriel, can you stay online because there's another question that's come in about the standards, the methodology that you mentioned at the end, the ICVCM methodologies, which is long awaited, and I think you're right to say this is really going to set steer the market in the future. So the question is really, with the new MRV standards in mind, do you see this benefiting particular cooking technology categories? Because you mentioned mostly biomass and biogas. What about renewably powered e-cooking? Can you comment on that?
Yeah, I mean, for transparency purposes, one of the hats I have is that I am co-chair of the expert panel of the Integrity Council for the Voluntary Carbon Market. So, but the specific categories that will be announced tomorrow are still embargoed. So but it's only for a few more hours because tomorrow 6 a.m. European time, that will be on the internet. But yes, I can say that the analysis included also e-cooking, and there will be something about it.
Great, thank you, Gabriel. I don't know, Susie, if you wanted to chip in with any of the other questions, and if we maybe taking it back to the adaptation issues and some of the renewability, and we don't want to maybe go down the rabbit hole of discussing the FNRB rates, which is a fundamental point that Gabriel raised, but it is, as far as we understand, high levels of unsustainability in biomass fuel in East Africa in particular. So I don't know if we want to go into that discussion a bit more and maybe pull Mary in to comment on that. How do you see it?
I do think that that would be something that Mary could say something about as well. So Mary, if you want to come on camera and talk about the sustainable use of biomass and what your research has shown.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, I agree that there is a huge concern in terms of sustainability in biomass sourcing, and that is one of the concerns in terms of bioenergy for households or for schools. But what I want to say is that from our research, it's possible to sustainably produce biomass for energy. And as it has been said, this really has a lot of multiple benefits. If you look at the high potential in terms of growing trees, it's in farms, agroforestry. And therefore, where we are working with households and farmers so that they can grow trees, multipurpose trees, and maybe use the residues for energy, which then they can produce surplus, and it can be sold in schools. And if we do that, the threat that currently stands in terms of biomass, energy, threatening the environment can be reversed, such that there is a lot of biomass production that it will be able to restore landscapes, improve adaptation, for example, of dry lands, but also it's a potential for carbon market. The farmers can also be able to earn carbon from growing trees sustainably. And there is also the potential of biomass electricity that can support e-cooking. But the big thing is that biomass needs to be produced sustainably.
Thank you, Mary. I think that this brings us to the end of our hour together. So if it's okay with you, James and Mary, I'm going to wrap up. I've noted through the discussion and questions that there are solutions, both technological and financial. So really our presenters took us through that, both Silvia, or all three, Silvia, Mary, and Gabriel. And also through the questions that we've received, we can see that there are solutions on the way, but really the question that remains for us is how are we going to bring them to scale? So how are we bringing improved cook stoves, electric pressure cooking for schools, and financing, for example, through the carbon market to scale? There are still data gaps on the actual impact that school cooking has on land degradation and deforestation, but the reverse is also true. If school cooking is done in a clean way, how can we incorporate climate adaptation and ecosystems restoration measures, and how can these be financed? We hope you have found this webinar educational and inspiring to tackle this problem. Thank you for your engagement through the questions, and a big thank you to our presenters. Thank you, James, also for co-hosting with me. So on behalf of the World Food Programme and UNEP, we look forward to further engaging with you, and please do not hesitate to reach out to James and myself. Thank you.